Alright class, so in this lesson we're going to learn how to factor trinomials, factoring trinomials. Trinomials is where you have three terms. Remember, a term is anything that's being separated by addition sign or subtraction sign. In this case, it's just addition right here. When we factor trinomials, we want to get two factors with binomials, something like this. Okay, so we want to change the form to look like from the trinomial to having two factors that have binomials in between. Basically, you'll have parentheses. You can notice that in my answer I have two factors. Here's my first factor, a plus b. The whole thing is being multiplied to this a plus b over here. Okay, so that's where my two factors are. Factor 1, and this should actually say factor 2. That's the second factor. Alright, so there's two types of trinomials that we're going to try to factor. One, factoring with the leading coefficient of 1. So the trinomial looks something like this, and then the number in front of your squared term will be 1. Okay, but you know that we don't write it. So if you don't see a number in the front, that means that it has a 1 in the front, and this is how we factor it. So we have x squared minus 3x, 13x plus 42. So we want to try to get two numbers here that when I multiply these two numbers together, I get 42, but then when I add the same two numbers together, I get negative 13. Okay, and this is the way that I like to do it. I like to put that number, the 42, the number I'm multiplying, up here, and then the other number, negative 13, the number I'm adding, I write it down here. And so this is where I'm trying to find the two numbers. So you have to just look at 42 and try to find all of the numbers that multiply together to get you 42. You can just do trial and error, or I'm just going to show you one way you can do it in the calculator. So if you go here and then just do 42 divided by x, okay, and then go to this little setting button and then hit convert it to a table, and then you'll see here all the two numbers that multiply together to get you this number 42. So like negative 2 times negative 21 gives you 42, negative 1, you know, and then you can try 3 times 14 is 42, 4 times 10.5 is 42, 5, okay, and then this is a good way to find the numbers. Now keep in mind, what is it that we're trying to find? We're trying to find two numbers that add together now that give me negative 13. Okay, so, and then from here you can go, well, just say negative 2 plus negative 21. Is that 13? Negative 13? No, it isn't. Okay. What else? So I know I'm looking for a negative number, so let me see. What about if I do negative 4? Nope. Negative 5? No. Negative 6? Well, that might work. Let's see. Negative 6 plus negative 7. Is that negative 13? Yes, it is, right there. So I'm going to use these two numbers, negative 6 and negative 7. Negative 6 and negative 7. So this is trying to find these two numbers is the hardest part about factoring, okay, but you can always use your calculator to find it, okay. And then what am I going to do with these two numbers? So negative 6 and negative 7, and then this is how I write my factor. So you're going to do x squared, x minus 6, and then x minus 7, and that's it. That's my two numbers, and that's how you factor it. All right, and one more thing here. If you have, let me just go backwards to check to see if I have factored it correctly. So if I go backwards, I'm going to multiply. So I have to do the FOIL method. So you have x times x, which is x squared. X times negative 7 is negative 7x. Negative 6 times negative 6 times x is negative 6x, and negative 6 times negative 7 is positive 42, because negative times a negative is positive. And then you combine your like terms. Negative 7 minus 6 is negative 13x plus 42. I got my original expression back. Okay? Alright, so let's go through some of these examples. I'm just going to do the odd numbers, and then I'll have you guys try the even ones. Okay, so I know that I'm going to put negative 8 here, negative 7 down here. I need two numbers to multiply together that give me negative 8, but when I add together, give me negative 7. You can, if you see it, you can just, write the numbers, but then you can also use the calculator. Okay, I'm just going to use the calculator. So I have here, I'm going to change this number to negative 8. Okay. Remember that these ones you can just you don't need so many numbers, okay? Okay, so I see that I have negative 2 and 4, and that gives me negative 2 plus 4 is positive 2. That's not what I want. I want to try to get, if you remember, I'm trying to get negative 7. Okay. How about negative 8 plus 1? Yes. Negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. So these are my two numbers, negative 8 plus 1. Negative 8 plus 1, negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. Those are my numbers. So to factor this out, I always like to write my parentheses first and write x and x, because that's how you get x squared. And then I just write negative 8, positive 1, and that's my answer. Okay, let me try to do this one. So you have 20 and then 9, which is 4 times 5 is 20, and then 4 plus 5 is 9. Okay, so you have b plus 4, b plus 5. So when you have both positive numbers, it just works a lot easier because you're just adding them. Just be careful when you have negatives in your problems. Okay, that's when it gets a little bit more challenging. You just have to be careful of the signs. Alright, so here I'm going to put negative 2, and then I'm going to put 1, because the coefficient of r is, there's a 1 here. Okay, so I have to multiply two numbers. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. And then negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. That's not what I want. So let me change the sign here. What about positive 2 times negative 1? I'll still get negative 2 here. And then 2 minus 1 is 1. So those are my numbers. I'm going to write my parentheses, r, add 2, and then subtract, and then minus 1. And then over here, I'm just going to look at my answer choices. I know that negative 6 times negative 2 is positive 12, and then negative 6 plus negative 2, that's negative 8. There we go. Okay? So that's the first part of this lesson. When we're factoring trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1, what that means is there's no number in front of the squared term. The next lesson I'm going to teach you is how do we factor when we have with a leading coefficient of any number, not just 1. So basically there's a number in front of your excuse me, in front of your squared term here. There's a number here. One way to do that is factoring by grouping, and I'm going to show you the steps to do that, okay? Here are the steps. I wrote out the steps for this problem right here. I'm not going to walk you through it. I'm just going to actually do some examples here, okay? So when we have a trinomial and we have a number in front of the x term, it's a little bit more work, okay? So I'm going to still try to find my magic numbers that go here, but what am I going to put here? Because I have, I can't just put negative 6 here, okay? I have to actually put 2 times negative 6, which is negative 12 here, and then I still want to try to add the numbers and get negative 1. Okay, that's the step that I have here. The first step here is find factors of a times c, meaning these two numbers together. Okay, and then you want to add them together to get negative 1. Well, negative 4 times positive 3 is negative 12, and then negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. That works. But we have a lot more work to do after that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite the problem as 2x squared, bring this down, and then instead of writing negative x, I'm going to write negative 4x plus 3x, these two numbers here, and then write down negative 6, bring this number down. Okay, so what I did was I brought this down, and then the negative x squared, I rewrote it like this. Okay, and I was very specific which two numbers I wanted to use by doing this process over here. And then I brought this negative 6 down here. Okay, my next step is we're gonna group the first two together and then the last two together. So we're gonna just make two groups here. We're gonna group these two together. It looks like I'm done, but I'm not. So next step is we're going to, after we make the two groups, we're going to factor each group separately. Okay? So let's look at this one. Don't worry about this yet. Let's just look at this. So now we want to factor this binomial. So it looks like we have to look for the common factor between both of these. I see that 2 goes into 2 and 2 goes into 4, so that's my first factor. Let me factor it out. And then I see that there's x squared and x, so I can take out 1x from here. Okay? And then so if I 2 divided by 2, it's just 1, and then x squared divided by x, I only have 1x left. Minus 4 divided by 2 is 2, and I took out the x, so I have x minus 2 here. And then now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to look at this separately and then try to figure out what I can take out of 3x and negative 6. It looks like 3 goes into 3 and 6 goes into 3, so my factor here that I can take out is 3. And since the 6 doesn't have an x, I can't take out an x. So I have here x minus 6 divided by 3 is 2. And when you're factoring by grouping, you should end up with the same thing inside of your parentheses. And what are we going to do? We're going to just rewrite this as just whatever, the same thing that you have here. We're going to rewrite that as x minus 2. Basically, we're factoring that out. When you factor out x minus 2, you're left with 2x here, and then this is positive 3. So I'm going to do plus 3 here, and that's my answer. Okay. So 2x squared minus 6 is factored to x minus 2, 2x plus 3. Okay. It takes a bit of time to get used to factoring by grouping, but you can do it. I'm going to walk you through these the odd examples here. Okay. So I have to still try to find the two numbers. So I'm going to write here the number that I'm trying to get here is A times C, 5 times 4, which is 20. And then they have to add together to give me negative 12. So what two numbers multiply together to give me 20, but add together to give me negative 12? I'm drawing a blank here. What are my factors of 20? Oh, that works. Negative 2 and negative 10. Negative 2 times negative 10 is positive 20. Negative 2 plus negative 10 is negative 12. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite my my expression here. I'm going to say this is 5x squared, and then instead of writing negative 12x, I'm going to use these two numbers. I'm going to do negative 2x and then negative 10x, and then bring down the plus 4. Okay? Sorry, let me move these over. Alright, now I'm gonna factor by grouping. I'm gonna group the first two together. I'm gonna group the second two together. And then I'm gonna factor their amount separately. Nothing goes into 5 and 2, but there is an x here and an x here. Okay, so I'm gonna take just the x out. So I have 5x squared divided by x, that's just 1x. And then just take out the x, you have 2. And when I say take out the x, I mean factor out the x. And another way to think about that is dividing out the x, okay? So, like for example, if I divide by the x here, I cancel out the x and one of the x's here, so I just have 1x left, so I have 5x left. And then same thing here, if I take out the x here, I just have 2 left. Okay? And then over here I have negative 10x plus 4. So a common factor here is 2. So I'm going to factor out a 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then I have an x. 4 divided by 2 is positive 2. Actually, that's negative 10. Okay? Now, again, my goal is to have the same exact thing here. I have a negative 5 and a positive 2. So what I had to do here originally was factor out a negative 2. I'm going to factor out a negative 2 from here. So I have 5x, and then 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. Now I have the same thing in my parentheses. I have 5x minus 2, write that by itself, and then x minus 2. Okay, last example. So I'm going to write 2 times negative 21, so that's negative 42. And then I'm trying to get 1 here. So some factors of negative 42 are negative 42. So let me try negative 7. Negative 7 plus 6 is negative 1. Negative 7 plus 6 is negative 1, and I'm trying to get positive 1. So that means that I can just change these around. So if I do negative 6, I would get positive 7. And then you can see that negative 6 plus 7 is the positive one. So these are my two numbers. Negative 6 and positive 7. No, that's not what I said. Yeah, that's what I said. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite this expression as 2a squared minus 6a plus 7a minus 21. And then we're going to group these two together. And then I see that I can factor out a 2a. Let me just show you something else here. When you're factoring stuff out, you know that you're looking for the greatest common factor. So I'm going to write 2a squared as 2a times a, basically all of the prime numbers, minus, and then 6, I can rewrite that as 3 times 2 times a. The reason I like doing this is because now I can circle the common factors. I have a 2 here, I have a 2 here, I have an a here, and then I have an a here. So that's my common factors, 2a. And then what do I have left? I have a here left, minus, and what do I have left here? Minus 3. Okay, that's how you can do factoring. Same thing here. 2a, 7a, I can write that as 7 times a, minus 21 is 7 times 3. So my common factor here is 7 and 7. I'm going to factor that out. So that is plus 7. And then what do I have left here? I have a minus, and then I have 3. I factored out the 7, right? So that's gone. So I just have a minus 3. Now I just rewrite it as factor out the a minus 3. So I have 2a plus 7. That's my answer. It's right there. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions. Oh, this one. Sorry, I'm not done yet. Factoring trinomials, but here I have factoring something that has 4 terms. You can just do the same thing here. You can just factor this by grouping. So I'm going to group the first 2, group the second 2. Alright, so here let me just write all the prime factors out. So you have 3, and you have x times x times x plus 3x times y squared. I can write that as y times y. So now let me circle the common factors. I have a 3 here, x here, x here. So that means that 3x is a factor. What do I have left here? X times x, which is x squared, plus y times y, which is y squared. And then same thing here. Write it in blue. So you have 4. I'm just gonna erase this. Alright, so you have 4x squared y. So 4 is 2 times 2. And then you have x times y plus 4 again is 2 times 2. And then you have y cubed, which is y times y times y. Now let's find all the common factors. You have 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. Oh, I can't circle the x. I don't have an x here, but I do have a y here and then a y here. So I have 2 times 2 and y. So that is 2 times 2 is 4y. And then if I take those out, what do I have left? X times x, which is x squared. And then y times y, which is y squared. And then I have the same thing in my parentheses, so I factor that out now. And then I have 3x plus 4y. Okay? That's how you can factor by grouping.